So, hello, Mark and John. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I have been looking forward to this conversation for days to come, and I think that our workforce is really going to enjoy what we're about to talk about. So, before we get started, I thought you guys could introduce yourself for our viewers who may not know who you are.
I'm John Taylor. I was the CEO of the Developmental Disability Center, the Boulder County Board for Developmental Disabilities, now known as Imagine, from 1983 until I retired in 2008. And I'm now retired down here in Arizona.
I'm Marc Emery, and I started the same year John became the CEO in 1983 and worked through a variety of jobs and was CEO for the last 10 years that I was with Imagine. I was there about 35 years and just got done last June.
And I was selected to succeed you, Mark, as Imagine's new CEO. So it's really exciting for me to get a chance to talk with both of you today, the two former CEOs of Imagine, and have a conversation about leadership through adversity. Everybody knows we're going through a pandemic right now, and the impact of the pandemic are far-reaching and long-lasting. And being a new CEO, I knew that I would be faced with some extraordinary challenges this year and how to lead an organization to be successful and meet our mission every day. The pandemic had brought a whole new level of challenge to the table and really is pushing me to the limit in terms of what great leadership looks like. And so I'm hoping that over the course of our conversation today, you'll be able to share some of the things that you guys learned and the lesson that maybe we can share back with our leadership and with me in terms of leading through challenges. Reflecting back on your time as CEO of Imagine, and maybe some times that were particularly challenging. When thinking about those situations, what did you do at that time to cope? So not actually problem solve, but in terms of cope with the challenges of the situation.
I came up with, there were four that stuck out to me, four events in 10 years that were, I mean, there was always events that were unpleasant, but four in particular that were not within our control. Three of them were, all four financially, financial issues that we had to, the challenges we had to mitigate. And the other one, the fourth one, of course, was the flood, which was also financial, but the impact of that on our day, and similar to the pandemic, it came really quickly. We prepared ourselves well for something like that. Now, granted, it doesn't make it easy because it was still difficult, but we had the plan and we put it in place and tracked people down. And in the end, to look back on it, I'm pretty proud of how we responded to that. And as well financially, you know, the foundation came back big time that year. So there was a lot of effort on all kinds of different levels of the company, which I think was something to look back on and say worked well.
Hey, Mark, follow-up question there. So I remember going back to the floods. I remember the days that shook out after the fact and feeling like you seemed so confident and knowing what the next thing to do was. Did you feel as confident as you looked?
Yes, I felt that we were so well prepared for that, and I'll explain why. The last 2 years John was CEO, one of those last 2 years, he directed me to write a disaster preparedness plan. And I think we had to do that as a result of 9/11. And the state and everybody was on board with disaster preparedness at the time. And it helped to write that for me to understand the difference between an emergency and a disaster, knowing what the likely disasters were going to be. I remember pandemic being one of them, and I remember, you know, there's a lot of things, and I narrowed it down to our geographic area, and oddly enough, flooding came up to the top for our area. And so a lot of the study that I had to do for that disaster preparedness plan was around that. Not ever expecting that we were going to see it, of course, but understanding what it meant to sort of address those things. And employees were comfortable knowing that, or maybe it appeared like we knew what we were doing. I think we did know what we were doing because of the fact that we were prepared. We went through the steps to be prepared, which was super important. And I probably, when I was going through that preparation, I might not have thought about it as being as important as it turned out to be. So maybe that helped with confidence as well.
Well, what great leadership and foresight on John's part to direct you to develop that plan in the first place, because, decades later, that plan did help serve, it provided us with a starting place in the early days of the response to the pandemic. So years later, that tool continued to provide that value to the organization. So with that segue, John, same question to you. When you think back to your time leading this organization and the challenges that you really had to work through, what bubbles up to the surface for you in terms of how you had to navigate those difficult situations?
I think for perspective, and Marc knows this since we started together, the 25 years I was there was very different than what Marc had to pick up with. Not that I left that for him on purpose. And what you have, I don't believe that, in retrospect, that I had to deal with the same kind of dilemma that you and he have. The disaster preparedness stuff, some of that was 9/11, some of it was because Boulder County floods, some of that was I was a firefighter and always going out, leaving Imagine, going out and fighting real fires. But mostly what I faced those 25 years was growth. I mean, when I got to Imagine, we had maybe $1 million and 40 people. And when I left, it was 700 people and $30 million or something like that. The big thing that I faced when I got to Boulder was deinstitutionalization. The big DI movement was growing across the country. And so we participated somewhat voluntarily in the deinstitutionalization of folks from Ridge. And we brought people out into the community that were unlike people that we had been serving up until that. Without getting into last names, you got Robert and Virginia, and I'm looking at the smiles on someone's face. I suspect some of them are still there, but they were hard. And as far as I remember, they were a new challenge for our staff. That was that was the first thing I faced when I got to Colorado. And I think we did a pretty good job of that. And I think in many respects, we showed the rest of the state that you could do it. We could take people with significant disabilities and put them out in the community in PCAs or foster homes or work them in jobs and EcoCycle or wherever else it happened to be. My favorite saying in life was always, and Marc will remember where this comes from, things work out best for those who make the best of the way things work out. John Wooden. That's what we did. When someone deals you a bad hand, learn how to play it as best you can and get the next one. And you're going to deal with it now, but you're going to get a cut, but it's going to pass and you're going to be around and you're going to have things to deal with in the future. What I'd be doing is figuring out what's going to happen after that cut and how do you want to be positioned for it. And I think that's what we did a lot for 25 years because we had a good team and tried to stay out of the way. And I think Marc did the same thing with his staff is, tell people where you wanted to go and let them figure out how to get you there and support them when it happens.
Oh, John, that's so well stated. I love that perspective. And, when I think about what you're saying, I have to think that there's something to how special it is to work for Imagine or to be a part of the Imagine organization, the mission that we have, the culture of this organization. And when you think about that, Marc, do you think that there was anything unique about the culture of the organization that helped you lead through some of those more difficult times that you mentioned earlier on?
Certainly, there's probably two or three things that come to mind. One of them was brought to my attention. It's not that we didn't know it, but imagine collectively had better knowledge of the service industry in Colorado and probably across the United States than any other person or entity in the state. And I was told that by somebody who was not working for Imagine, by somebody outside of us, saying the knowledge and it's because we did our homework. And I think that had a lot to do with a lot of the culture inside of Imagine was doing our homework and always expecting something else. But it was clear to me that we had better knowledge because of people who were curious and did their homework. So that culture went deep into Imagine's culture, the idea that we would do our homework and we were always looking for what's next down the road. And I think to help with our workforce, when I would have conversations with them, I would make sure that they knew that we knew what we were talking about. I would make sure that they could ask anything they wanted to, and we could tell them, here's the background, here's why this is the way it is, and being able to tell stories about that. But I think in the end, the last thing I would try to leave people with is if we do our jobs well, people that we don't even know will benefit from our work. And they won't know who Imagine is, and we won't know who they are. But it does put us in a great position to have an influence on the world beyond what our daily work. And I think that sort of conversation with the workforce in Imagine helped that cultural, we're always going to be curious about what's next, whether it's technology or something else, and how it can benefit people or their families. It opened their eyes to, we're not just going to do what we're doing day in and day out anymore. Ask them, you can make more money working anywhere else. Why are you here? And 99 times out of 100, the answer is going to be because I know I'm having an effect on somebody's life that I don't know. And I just like, okay, I'm good to go. Now I can go back and do my job.
Yeah, I agree. The workforce is incredible here at Imagine. And then just in the 8 weeks that we've been dealing with this pandemic, we've seen so much resiliency. I am so impressed continuously throughout this time how quick our staff have shown up and met the task ahead of them. So that's fantastic. I really think that the mission and the work that we do is a driving force behind everybody's efforts. And that's special. I don't think you see that in most organizations. And that, I think, brings me to my last question for you two gentlemen is, what advice would you leave with me as I think about how to lead this company through the pandemic in the years to come? What advice would you give me?
I think listening at a very personal level and understanding whomever you're talking with, what their personal issue is, and acknowledging that and appreciating it. And people with disabilities want the same opportunities that everybody else has. And right now, that opportunity is to also, safer at home. That you can't get to do everything you want to. Nobody's getting to do everything you want to. So don't expect more because you have a disability than what everybody else has to do. But at the same time, we're here to create those opportunities. So I think a lot of it right there is in that communication.
The other thing I'd be careful of right now with the pandemic is, I think this is still the case. It will pass. And the more I think people get all hung up on, woe is me, it's so bad, what the hell are we going to do? That message just gets pervaded through the company. I think that to the extent that you can keep that, here's where we're going to go. Here's new things are going to come. There's going to be great opportunity when this is done, and people haven't done this. Look at the needs that are going to be out there. So let's get prepared for that. I mean, that's where I like to play, was in the play box when nobody else wanted to do it. Let's figure out how to do that. I mean, that's the stuff that you and I did a lot of, Mark, was how do we move forward? But I would be concerned that you don't want the organization to get such a woe is me, how bad is it, what the hell are we going to do mentality. It's bad. Admit it, it's bad, but it's going to be better. So how are we going to be prepared for it when it's better? That's what I'd be doing.
That is fantastic. I really appreciate that. And you're right. I mean, and that's resilient thinking. Most things that are bad don't stay bad forever.
No.
There's a day where the sun comes out again and things are good again. So I appreciate it. That's a great. Well, Marc and John, I just want to thank you both again for taking time to chat with me this afternoon. It's been really fun for me, and I picked up some new lessons and things to keep in mind as the next weeks and months are to come. And in the spirit, John, of your advice, I have to think about the future, and things will be good again, and it's not all bad, and there's plenty of opportunity, right? There's plenty of opportunity ahead of us to do great things on behalf of people with IDD in this community. And you guys both have such tremendous reputations and legacies that you left behind as CEOs. It's such an opportunity for me to be able to speak with both of you. So I want to thank you again for your time. I appreciate it.
You're too kind.
All right. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Minute now, there are going to be a couple S-16s and some A-10s doing a flyover, probably right over my house.
Oh, cool.
Because they're doing all commemorative things for the workers. The Air Force Base is just up the road. Actually, I hear them coming right now. You're going to get a treat. Can you hear them? Yep, they're going to be A-10s.
Did you plan that? That's perfect.
Perfect timing.